Well, good morning, good morning. My name is Sabine Soumare. I am the Executive Director of the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, also called WEKH. Before we begin, I wish to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the traditional territories of the indigenous peoples whose presence continue to enrich our communities. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon territory is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans and non-newcomers, have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. It's now with great pleasure, joy, pride, that I welcome you all today and look at this beautiful room. It's time to let's not be shy. Let's not be shy because today is the day that we celebrate the 2024 State of Women Entrepreneurship Report. It is a big report, and Wendy Suker will be presenting the findings. But before that, it's a pleasure to be surrounded by our partners, friends. The minister is here. It's a full room with the ecosystem. So thank you for being here. Because today, we are all together to celebrate the launch of the report. But now I'd like to say a few words about WEKH. For the past 6 years, we've been the ears, the voice of the ecosystem. WEKH is one of the pillars of the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, which includes a $7 billion in investment and commitments. We've been working across the country through 10 regional hubs, and we have hubs representative in the room, so thank you for being here. What we do, our mandate, is to share research, resources on women entrepreneurs in Canada, and we support women entrepreneurs by unlocking data and information to help women entrepreneurs succeed across all sectors of our economy and at all stages of growth. We also build a large network that includes 250 organizations to host and support programming that highlights opportunities and the best practices for women entrepreneurs and the organizations who support them. I should also say that as part of the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, WEKH works very closely with the Government of Canada to increase women as entrepreneurs access to financing, talents, expertise, networks. But also an important information here to say is that we know that the systemic bias continues to be embedded in the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And that bias is a result of the definitions and values that we place as a society on innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. So now, what we have done with WEKH is making sure that we have a place for women entrepreneurs. So WEKH launched the See It, Be It database in 2019, which is a resource featuring over 1,800 women entrepreneurs, successful women entrepreneurs. And I would say, I'm sure we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the room. Please nominate yourself, be part of this database. Successful women entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds, sectors, experiences, and regions across Canada are part of this database. And in fact, the reason why we want to make sure that you are part of this database is because we need to see successful women entrepreneurs so others can there become one. On that note, of course, I want to reiterate how great it is to gather here today as we'll be sharing key findings of our flagship report and informing the ecosystem on the progress made, the gaps identified, and also the opportunities to better support the ecosystem. So now I would like to introduce the Minister, the Honourable Rechie Valdez, who is the Minister of Small Business. She has been a member of various parliamentary committees and associations, including the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs and the Canadian NATO Parliamentary Association, as well as the chair of the Canada-Philippines Parliamentary Friendship Group. Minister Valdez is a Canadian entrepreneur, television personality, and a community advocate. She is the first Filipino-Canadian woman elected as a member of parliament and appointed to cabinet, and is committed to ensuring the diverse voices of her community are heard. Minister, please come join me here.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think we're all asleep or have not had coffee. Good morning, everyone. All right. I need me some femme energy this morning. Good morning. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Sabine. I too would like to acknowledge that we're gathered here on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee people, and the Wendat peoples. So I'm really excited to be here this morning today with many inspiring women like yourself, Sabine, Dr. Wendy Suke, Nadine Spencer from Brand EQ, Vicky Saunders from Coralus, and Magnolia Perrin from NACA. I cannot thank you all enough for each one of you, and actually all of you here in this room, for the work that you're doing. You'll hear me share my story as we go through the Q&A session, but I just want to pause and say, like, wow, we've come a long way. This did not exist when I was an entrepreneur way back when. And so to be in a room like this is truly an honor. If we want to solve the problems and close the gaps faced by women entrepreneurs in this country, we first need to understand those gaps. And today we're going to unlock and understand what those gaps are more. And as a former small business entrepreneur, I know firsthand the challenges that we face. So when I made the decision to leave a super secure 15-year corporate job to pursue my creative passion, baking, it wasn't easy. It was scary. But the most exciting step that I had ever taken in my life was really taking a leap to believe in myself as a person, to believe in what I was trying to create through my baking products, and ultimately what I was learning about myself and my own personal journey. And there's so many of you in the room here who know this firsthand and who support many other women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs alike to be able to help us through this journey. And so I'm so proud to be able to bring this type of perspective to both Cabinet and to Ottawa. I'm proud to be here today with all of you to mark the release of the annual report on the state of women's entrepreneurship in Canada for 2024. Yes, we can clap. It's a big deal. C'est pourquoi je suis si content de me joindre à vous pour célébrer la sortie du rapport annuel et l'état de lieu de l'entrepreneuriat féminin au Canada 2024. For the last 5 years, the creation of this report, supported by our government, is helping shed light on what women entrepreneurs face across the country. Previous reports tell us a story of systemic challenges faced by women entrepreneurs, challenges that are magnified for Indigenous and racialized women. These reports have quantified the devastating impact of the pandemic, but they've also uncovered some extraordinary innovations that resulted as well. Collectively, we need to understand what's working so we can scale up success and become stronger. Knowledge is power, and the information gathered in the State of Women Entrepreneurs report informs the policy we write to help take women's entrepreneurship to the next level and inspire even more to follow their dreams to opening a small business. Studies have shown that when you advance gender equality and women's participation in the economy, we can add up $150 billion in GDP alone. Investing in women entrepreneurs isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. And that's why over the last 7 years, our government has dedicated to ensure full and equal participation of women in the economy. We're literally leveling the playing field for everyone. Despite representing half of the population, unfortunately, women own only 17% of small and medium-sized businesses in Canada. In 2018, we decided as a government to try and change that. As you already heard Sabine mention, we launched the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, or WESS, $7 billion of an investment, the very first of its kind here in Canada and in history. Data shows that women-led businesses are socially responsible. They are more likely to focus on environmental and societal sustainability initiatives, and they can and do achieve higher performance. Take it a step further, and businesses with racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have higher financial returns. The numbers tell the story. When we build a more inclusive economy, we're building a stronger economy for Canada. It's safe to say that WEKH has been a huge success. Our investment has helped over 22,000 women entrepreneurs from coast to coast to coast. And I've had the privilege of meeting so many women entrepreneurs, and they've shared to me their stories, and probably so many of you in the room. 22,000. I just want you to take a moment. I know that sounds like a big number. That's a significant number. That's how many lives we're changing. And we're definitely not stopping there. Our government has made historic investments to ensuring women get a fair playing field when deciding to open their business. And that's why we launched $10 a day childcare, which has helped more women enter the workforce. We are literally making history here in Canada. We've enhanced the Canada Child Benefit to make sure more women and families have more money to help with the high costs of raising kids. Introducing national pharmacare legislation so that women have universal access to free contraceptives. Providing special funding specifically for women entrepreneurs during the pandemic so that they can stay on their feet. And implementing gender-based analysis on all our policies to ensure that the well-being of women is considered in everything we do, literally everything, in every ministry. One of the highlights in this year's State of the Women Entrepreneurship Report is that Canada consistently ranks among the top countries in the world implementing government policies and programs that support and empower women entrepreneurship. And I'm so proud to be part of a government that is leading the charge globally in creating a more equitable economy for women and, in turn, a more equal society. The success of Women Entrepreneurship Strategy is due to the women entrepreneurs around the country who are taking the leap to pursue their passions. But this success is also because of all of you. And supporting that entire ecosystem, we need support. I remember as an entrepreneur, I needed help, even when I didn't know that I needed it. And none of this is possible without you, and that's a fact. Each one of us here in this room that are gathered together on a Monday morning really early, this is an initiative that we've taken to say, you know what? I want to be part of something better, and I want to be part of a future that involves making sure that women entrepreneurs are supported. What I've enjoyed the most, again, is really meeting the extraordinary stories. Women who are succeeding. Mother and daughter-owned business. I think I just got chills. The thought of me one day being able to start a business with my daughter is just phenomenal. Women who are employing other women. Women who are mentoring other women. The success of a business is often calculated by what's on paper. But the creativity, tenacity, and the resilience of women entrepreneurs are beyond this measure. I just want to share a quick story. So I was driving home the other day with my family, and it was me and my husband at the front, and my daughter Cassidy and my son Kyle at the back. And my husband's like, "Hun, I need to share something with you." I'm okay. He goes, "Cassidy, can you tell your mom again what you told me this morning about what you want to be when you grow up?" So my daughter's like, "Sure." She's like, "When I grow up, I want to be a Kung Fu master or a teacher or a member of parliament." And the reason why I share that is girls and women are paying attention to what we're doing. They're paying attention to our actions and the change we're making. And I just want us to really think about that. And my daughter gets to watch her mom do what she does every day, but so do all the girls and women in your lives who are watching you do what you do every day. Investing in the success of women entrepreneurs is one of the most meaningful actions we can take to build a strong and inclusive economy. So from the bottom of my heart, I just really want to thank you for your commitment, your contributions to making a difference for our future. Thank you so much.
Minister, thank you so much for everything you just said. The story about your daughter, I think, resonates in the room. So thank you for that. You also mentioned a number, 22,000 women entrepreneurs have been benefited from the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy. And I think it's important to mention it. Why? Because it's an impact. And we need to hear more the impact that was created within the ecosystem. So thank you for that, Minister. And merci beaucoup d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. So now I would like to introduce Dr. Wendy Soukier, who is the Professor of Entrepreneurship and Strategy at the Diversity Institute. She's also the Diversity Institute founder, the Academic Director of the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. It's going to take some time, so please bear with me. She's also the Academic Research Director of the Future Skills Center, a Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. She is the co-author of the bestseller Innovation Nation, Canadian Leadership from Java to Jurassic Park. And she has served in leadership roles across sectors and has chaired and served on many boards of directors. And she has received way too many awards to list, and she's an amazing leader, and she will be speaking. She's the brain with the research team. She's the brain behind the research report that she will be presenting. So please, clap, clap, clap for Wendy.
Oh, the introductions just make me feel old. I'm really pleased to be here today, and I'm so thrilled all of you are here and not the other 100 and something people who registered, because otherwise we'd have problems with food. But I think the fact it's a packed room on a Monday morning is a pretty good indication of how popular the minister is and how important the topic is for today. And this has happened to me before. There we go. I am going to try to keep my remarks quite brief because all of you can read the report. And we're going to have some fulsome discussions about some of these issues. And also the minister has taken many of the key themes that I was going to talk about. Great minds. I have a PhD in information systems, but it never helps. Okay. So some of the points that have already been made that we keep trying to underscore is the importance of small, medium enterprises and entrepreneurship to the Canadian economy. And we hear a lot about comparisons between Canada and the US. It's important to recognize that our economies are structured differently. And here, small, medium enterprises account for the majority of private sector employment. We've already heard about how entrepreneurship can add to the economy, and leveling the playing field for women will make a significant impact. I also wanted to really highlight the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, which many of you are part of, and we're thrilled to see ecosystem partners from across the I think there's like somebody who's in the machine moving this forward, but recognizing the different pillars and their importance. So we are really aimed at sharing data to strengthen the ecosystem, but we have it's going the wrong way. I don't know where my friends are who manage the technology, but something is definitely awry. Okay, so I'll just go like this secretly. Okay, thanks, David. I wondered, it's, ghost in the machine, but it was very strange. So some of you, how many people have received loans or investments through the Women Entrepreneurship program in the room? A few. And how many of you are part of the ecosystem and have received funding through the ecosystem? We have lots of other players here. And how many of you have benefited from training or other programs that have been offered through the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy? And how many of you are here to find out more about the program? Okay, there we go. So there are different pillars. We're focused on the research piece, but we work very closely with those who are actually doing direct service delivery. And during COVID, we tried to fill some gaps. What's important is not just the scale of the investment, in my view, but what is even more important, we found this when we talk to people internationally, is that it's a whole of government approach. So what does that actually mean? What that means is there are targeted funds to support the ecosystem, to provide financing, to support individual entrepreneurs. Super important, and it's a massive investment. But what is even more important, and what makes Canada a global leader in this space, is the fact that there is also a commitment to unlocking the funds that are in different parts of government. So that means providing equitable access to the funding that is offered through IRAP or the regional development agencies or Agriculture Canada or Infrastructure Canada or ESDC and so on. And when you think about it, despite the large investment in targeting women entrepreneurs, there's a lot more money out there than is just in that pot. And that's where the commitment, I would argue, of this government is so unique and will be long lasting. Because when you drive change within the structures, when you embed a gender and diversity lens into all of your program design and delivery, it's a lot more difficult to take that away. So I think that's really one of the very important contributions to the program. We have 10 hubs across the country. Many of our hub leaders are here. We do lots of research. We do the state of women entrepreneurship. We also do targeted reports on specific issues. Tanya Saba, who is the co-director of the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, has led much of the research along with our other research partners. And we've worked with organizations to dig into data. We have lots of data sharing agreements with other organizations, which means that we have quite a lot of information at our disposal. Next, please. One of the things we've just started doing this year with our ecosystem partners is collecting data on the overall impact of the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy. And so a number of the ecosystem partners have started contributing their data. We're still waiting for more, so that we can actually understand what works for whom. We know the money is going out. We know roughly the number of people being served, but what is the actual impact? What do people really need? What barriers are they still experiencing? And we found some really interesting things in the results in terms of the percentage of respondents who have entered new industries and sectors. I can have the next. The extent to which networks have been strengthened, we know that's important. The extent to which participants have introduced innovation, we also know that's important. And the extent to which they have started establishing sustainable development goals as part of their overall strategies, which we view as being really fundamental. And I've already talked about this, but I think the global perspective on what's happening in Canada is really important, because as much as people around the room wish we had more of this or more of that, the fact is we are the envy of many countries around the world because of the extent of the commitments, and that is being reflected in our standing globally. When you look at the international indices, when you look at the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor results, Canada is near the top in terms of women's entrepreneurial intent and success. And we'll continue to dig into that. We also know that many of the barriers that have been identified in Canada are global in nature. I was at the UN last week talking to women from the US and the UK, and the amount of similarity in the barriers was quite remarkable, but there were significant differences in the approach that Canada has been taking. Next. And one of the things that we've really underscored is the importance of, and this came out of the research, and I think was perhaps not what the government anticipated, but starting to dig into some of the structural barriers that women face. And some of those structural barriers include the very way in which we think of innovation. You know, you think of entrepreneurs, you think of innovation, you think of tech. Even though tech entrepreneurs and the use of technology to drive innovation is a small fraction of what is important. And one of the really interesting things that came out at the UN, which might surprise you, is the British Beauty Council was presenting their data, and they showed that the beauty industry, which tends to be women dominated, had faster growth rates, more export, and higher margins than the tech sector, right? But a lot of those other sectors are overlooked for reasons that we have seen. New research now out of ISET and Stats Canada starts to look at things like product innovation, process innovation, market innovation as part of the mix. And you've seen this before. You know, one of the constant fights, and Sabine mentioned it, is to challenge the stereotypes of what an entrepreneur is, what an entrepreneur looks like, and what an entrepreneur does. Next, please. So some of the data has already been mentioned. We know that actually in 2023, our estimates are now women are an average of 18.4% of majority owners of businesses. Depends on which data set you use, but we're certainly moving in the right direction. We know, however, that 90% of women entrepreneurs are still unincorporated and self-employed, and we have to focus on ensuring that they are part of the mix. And we've done lots of work in that area. And we know that women entrepreneurs still earn less than men entrepreneurs. And one of the things I think is critical, and I'm sorry Ruth Veshel's not here, I've said it before, is we need to focus on access to financing, for sure. But even more important is access to markets, right? Access to customers. And some of the work that's been done in procurement, for instance, is absolutely fundamental to moving us forward. Next, please. Sorry, David, I need you. Okay. What a team, what a team. So we've talked about the barriers in overall. We've done some research specifically on venture capital. How many people here are part of the venture capital initiative across Canada? A few are working on both increasing awareness of the opportunities for venture capital investments among women entrepreneurs, and on the other side, helping to make VCs more equitable. We also know that it's not working. We've talked about this before, the industry distribution. Next, please. And of course, we bring an intersectional lens to the work that we do, and we have lots of folks around the room who can talk in more detail about the specific challenges and opportunities represented by women entrepreneurs from equity-deserving groups. Next, please. This is an area that we've dug into this year with help from the Future Skills Center and working closely with Corrales, and that is really trying to better understand women's contributions. Women's contributions to the transition to net zero, because that is something that we haven't spent enough time talking about. We talk about growth, we talk about job creation, we talk about narrowing the export gap between men and women entrepreneurs, but women actually lead in terms of the development of businesses and contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals, and particularly the transition to net zero. And so that's an area we've really dug into, because if you're serious about the SDGs, if you're serious about transition to net zero, you have to include women. And to date, I would argue there's been an awful lot of focus on green tech, where we know women tend to be underrepresented, and not enough focus on green transition, new processes, new products, new services that advance sustainability. And so this is another example where we're trying to dig in to some of the systemic issues. Next, please. And lots came out in the research review. We know that women are more likely to invest in training their employees. We know that women are still less likely to serve international markets, but the gap between men and women there is narrowing. And Jennifer Cook from EDC is here, and of course can talk more about that later. And we also know that women are responsible and they repay their loans. Next slide, please. And this is we have a paper that's coming out that actually looks at reframing the discussion. You know, there's a lot of talk about women are risk adverse. Some might say they're just responsible in terms of how they approach financing. So lots more that we can talk about in terms of barriers, but I really want to move forward and try to wrap this up. So let's go to the next, please. And the next. And the next. And the next. And this is where I think we're making a unique contribution, and that is really laying bare where the barriers are, where the biases are in the actual ecosystem. And people have heard me speak about this before. You know, when you look at financing of women entrepreneurs and you present identical pitches by men and women, men get asked different questions. They get asked about their potential. They get asked about what they plan to do. Women get asked about their track record. Men get more money and they're more likely to get money, right? And that's really well-established research. It isn't, though, just individual bias of the people making the decisions. It's also bias that is baked into the systems, which are derived from historic data, right? How many bankers in the room? Or former bankers? Yeah, Shannon puts her hand up whenever I ask a question. We know about the 5 C's that are used to make decisions about investing in women. And those risk assessment frameworks are based on historic data about men. And what we're finding is that there are new models that challenge those assumptions. So we have to, you know, my dean, Cynthia Holmes, is here from the Ted Rogers School of Management. She would know. Last year we taught entrepreneurship courses where there wasn't one single case study involving a woman entrepreneur. So every single player in the ecosystem really has to do their share. Next, please. And we've already talked a lot about challenging stereotypes. I'm a big fan of the UK Investing in Women Code. The World Bank has picked it up. We're hoping that Canada will move forward with not requiring financial institutions to invest in women, simply requiring them to report on who's getting their money and how much money they're getting. And this is a really, really, transparency drives action, right? The fact that we don't know, frankly, what percentage of the money from the Business Development Bank goes to women is a challenge. So we really have to push at the societal level for more transparency and accountability. We have to recognize those systemic barriers. Next. See it, be it, challenge the stereotypes. Next. I am talking about Corrales, not because I like Vicky best or that she inspired the glasses, but because Corrales, has good data and they share it with us. And I want you to look at this carefully because we know about the importance of big investments in long-term sectors and e-vehicles and so on and so on. And I'm not challenging those decisions. But what I'm saying is you get really good return on investment putting money into women. So look at this, $10 million invested in 80 ventures with a repayment rate of 92%, which means you still got $9.2 million to then reinvest and reinvest. And it created almost 1,000 jobs, right? And what's even more important is every one of those ventures was contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I put this up not because Coralus is the best or the only, but Coralus provides the data. And I believe that if we collect and share more data, we've got amazing stories like this right across the ecosystem. So that's why we're chasing you, just so you understand. Next, please. And we all have work to do in our organizations, including post-secondary institutions. Next. We have to think about the stages and we have to think about how the ecosystem fits together, because one of the things that I find our biggest challenge, even after a few years of working on this, is there's actually lots of money in the system, but women entrepreneurs have trouble finding their way to it. And if they come in one door, they need to be referred to where they should go. And some organizations do a really good job of that. And some organizations are so busy, running their own programs, they don't really have time to refer. But in my dream world, we would have better integration and coordination across the ecosystem. So regardless of what stage you're at, you can get directed to the right supports. Next, please. And we have tools to help organizations do the assessments of their gender and diversity inclusion. Next. And have talked to government organizations, banks, and others about how to do a better job of designing their programs, implementing their programs, and making their programs supportive of women. Next. And then, of course, at the individual level, thinking about capacity and training, of course, for women entrepreneurs, but even more importantly, thinking about building capacity for inclusion among the gatekeepers. Next. And so our sharing platforms, Sabine mentioned, lots of other tools that we're making available. And at this stage, I would like to wrap up and hand it back to Sabine. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wendy. There was a lot of information, but I think the whole room here, also people online, the whole ecosystem needed to hear that for sure. It's like I said, when I started, a lot of opportunities, gaps identified, but also the progress made. So now I think the minister has to go somewhere, if I'm not mistaken, for 10 minutes. So we'll leave the minister, leave the room for 10 minutes. But in the meantime, I would like to do an interactive activity with you. So you see 4 questions here on the screen. Apologize to those online. You won't be able to participate. But you can take a short break. So on your table, you should all have an index cards. If you don't have one, we can provide it. Pens as well. And we would like you all to answer these questions, actually. The purpose of this exercise is to gather all the information from the rooms and also provide a preliminary summary at the end of the day. So please, what have you heard or seen this year that you find encouraging? Please provide examples of policies, projects, programs, data that you see as promising developments in your context. Where do you see barriers? We spoke about barriers, but where do you see them? Work that needs attention. The third one, I really like it because that will help our work at WEKH. So what would you like to see WEKH prioritize in its work plan for 2024, 2025? And if you have any suggestions, please, it's the moment as well to share. So I'll give you 10 minutes. You also grab some foods in the meantime, if you need, if you want.
Because as you can imagine, the minister has a hard stop. So if everybody could take their seats again. So now I'm really pleased to be able to begin our fireside chat with the minister. Can someone clink their glass? Not kissing anyone. Because I ain't got anyone to kiss. But I wanted to introduce our fireside chat participants briefly. You've already met the minister. I wanted to say one important thing. She's broken glass ceilings in the finance industry. As an entrepreneur, I think her book will be called From Banker to Baker to Minister. But it should not escape anyone in this room how horrible it is to be a woman in politics in some respects these days, in terms of how you become a target for all sorts of nastiness. And I really would like to applaud the minister, not just for her work on our behalf, but for sticking it out in a really, really tough environment to serve all of us. And, you know, it's tough for women, and it's even tougher for racialized women who really become unfairly targeted. I also wanted to introduce Magnolia Perrin, who is the Indigenous Women and Youth Program Manager for the National Aboriginal Capital Corporations Association. Nadine Spencer, who is the CEO of Brand EQ, and Vicki Saunders, who is the CEO and founder of Coralus, which I always mispronounce. So maybe we'll start off with you, Minister. I think you've already talked a lot about why you see investing in entrepreneurship is important, why you see investing in women entrepreneurs is particularly important. But I wonder if you can share a little bit more about your experience as an entrepreneur and how that has shaped your approach to this portfolio.
I think that's a great question. And thank you for acknowledging the challenges that I face literally every minute of every day. Well, you know, when I was reviewing the report myself, it was taking me back because it wasn't too long ago that I was an entrepreneur, right? It was like right before I got elected. When I first started, I mean, at the time, there really wasn't any support. And I can tell you for certain that I bootstrapped everything. When I first started, for those of you that don't know, so I'm a self-taught baker, discovered my creative passion baking my daughter's first birthday cake. And of course, like, you know, when you're kind of figuring this whole world out, I had to figure out my recipes. But more than anything else, like trying to structure what a business could look like. I had to purchase all of my own products. I had my own equipment, my own ingredients, you know, just everything almost like from scratch. And then I think about the supports I had. Thank you, husband, who helped drive me to and from hockey practice while delivering a cake. And I mean, that was like my life before. And I think about where we've come, and that's why I always refer to it. It's like now with WES, not only do we have capital investments to help support women, which really ultimately gives you the funding to really kickstart your business. And yes, we pay back our loans. But then we also have invested in this massive ecosystem of ecosystem partners futurepreneurs, so many of you in the room who support women entrepreneurs. I would have loved to have someone have my back. I would have loved to know that I could go somewhere to get advice, because, all I had at the time was like me and my husband, like trying to figure it all out, or my brother helping me package. So supports and capital, very vital. Supports in the ecosystem, the networking opportunities. I mean, the stats. So WEKH has hosted well over 1,000 events, and well over 30,000 women have attended those events. Think about, when I tell you about the impact of a woman and a woman entrepreneur, it's literally the effects that a woman has. It's like throwing a rock in a water, and the ripple effect that a woman has to their family, to their support system, and all their families even. It's phenomenal. So I'm really proud of the work that we're doing, because I know what it was like when I first started. And I think about a world where the future entrepreneurs who begin or who are in the process of, building their business really truly have the supports that they truly need every day.
Thanks so much for that. I'll go to you next, Nadine, because you not only have built an incredible business, but you've certainly faced all sorts of challenges along the way, including tall poppy, tall grass gets cut, glass cliff, and so on. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what you see specifically facing Black women entrepreneurs in the ecosystem, and more importantly, what has helped, what has made a difference.
Of course, I've spoken to women all across the country, and Black women entrepreneurs feel that the system is not stacked in their favor. And based on the results that we see in the study, when we drill down more to Black women entrepreneurs, we can see that. So the lack of access to capital, the lack of access to networks for Black women entrepreneurs. As an entrepreneur, I remembered myself, building my business. I certainly didn't have that person to open the door and say, you should give this business to Nadine, or you should mentor Nadine in this particular way. And I think that the encouraging thing that I see is that when we talk about the tall poppy syndrome, I don't know how many of you in the room know about the tall poppy syndrome, is that if you're exceeding and succeeding, you get cut back. They cut the poppies back. And I see this a lot with women entrepreneurs, especially Black women entrepreneurs, that they ascend and they get cut back. And not just in entrepreneurship, but in leadership positions as well. And so what do we do? How do we overcome that? We have to build supports. Like, I look at this room and I see it looks like 200 or 300 women that is able to support other entrepreneurs. And I think we really have to build mentorship, and more so than mentorship, sponsorship as well. And when we talk about sponsorship, I was at an event last week, and it was Nancy Mitchell. She said, it's when you put your name on someone else's name so they can have the opportunity. When we're in a room and in a space, if we don't see someone, we have to say, where is Shannon? How are we going to bring her in? Where's Sabine? And I think those are some of the things that we have to look at as we build and support women, and an economy of women supporting other women. Because when we look at funding, 2% of venture funding goes to women entrepreneurs. So what does that mean? That means we're left always trying to struggle and push to make our businesses work. And what I've seen in terms of the Rise Up Pitch competition that the BVP puts on, where they had 1,700 women entrepreneurs in a program. I remembered one of the women, she wrote back to me and she said, I didn't win the $10,000, but what I got was more than the $10,000, because I now have business literacy, financial literacy, and I'm able to plan my business to go to the next level. So I think those are the supports that we need for Black women entrepreneurs specifically.
Thanks so much. So Magnolia, we know also from the research that Indigenous women also face multiple barriers, but that often people overlook the diversity within the Indigenous community. So I wonder if you can talk about that first, and then talk more about the unique perspectives of diverse Indigenous women.
Yeah, thank you so much. Is my mic on?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so NACA, we did research back in 2020 when we first started our Women Entrepreneurship Initiative, and we surveyed over 115 Indigenous women across the country to understand what were some of the challenges they were facing, some of the barriers and opportunities that we could explore to support them. And of course, things like access to capital, that was the top challenge, not having the equity to invest in their business. The current landscape of financing didn't meet the types of businesses they were starting, because many were starting part-time home-based businesses and were looking for microloans or microfinance. And there just wasn't a lot of that in the ecosystem. Also, things like balancing lots of different responsibilities from family, community, and their business. That was identified as kind of the second top challenge. And we know things like childcare and transportation to be able to participate in events like today and other networking and workshops and training is a barrier. But in terms of the diversity of women entrepreneurs, a question I'm asked a lot is, what kind of businesses do Indigenous women entrepreneurs start? And the answer to that is they're in every industry and every field. We have women, of course, in doing things like retail sales. We have, food and hospitality, but we also have women in tech. We have women in healthcare. An example would be one of the entrepreneurs our network has supported opened the first Indigenous-owned pharmacy in Ontario. We have another woman out in Manitoba who she actually is the only producer of cones for jingle dresses, and she ships all over Canada, North America, and even to Europe. So Indigenous women are in all different industries, and I think that's why campaigns like the See It, Be It campaign are so important, because young Indigenous women and girls in our communities, when they see women doing these incredible businesses, it inspires them to say, hey, if someone like her can do it, I can do it too. So I think that's really powerful. And I would just say, like, that's part of, I guess, some of the stereotypes or bias we have is trying to, limit what kind of businesses Indigenous women can start. And I think the more we recognize and support Indigenous women in underrepresented industries too, we can also break that barrier more.
Well, it's funny because one of the sessions we did, I think last week, I looked at the list and Tara Fraser was there, and she's not only broken barriers in terms of owning her own airline, but also now starting a business with electric planes, right? So, and I think that's one of the other things we've observed in the research, I'm sure you have as well, is that Indigenous peoples generally, but Indigenous women in particular, are more likely to combine environmental and social responsibility with their business objectives. And so again, ensuring that they are not left out of the equation is critical. Speaking of sustainability issues, Vicky, I wonder if you can add your perspective. The results that Corliss has produced are impressive. And I think what is particularly noteworthy is the model for data collection and analysis, because you were doing that even before we were banging on your door. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the role of women-owned businesses in sustainability and some of the examples that the research has revealed.
Thanks, Wendy. I brought my show and tell here. So I love this line from Buckminster Fuller, and he says that pollution is nothing but resources we aren't harvesting. And I'd like to just say to everyone in this room, if we massively increase the number of women entrepreneurs running businesses and we all have extractive business models, and we're adding more garbage to the planet, and we're not paying attention to how we're running our businesses, we are going to create even more harm on the planet. So our focus at Corliss is to actually find those best practices of people who are building with sustainability, share it, follow it. So this is, speaking of Indigenous entrepreneurs, Beam Paints. Love this. This is her packaging. It's wood, and she's got paint in the wood. They evaluate every single product based on its impact on the earth, the air, the water, the creatures, the people in the company, the community, and the world. Imagine doing that, right? With all of our businesses. Their first, when they first Indigo reached out to them and said, we'd love to put you in the store. And so they sent their samples, and then Indigo said, but it all has to be wrapped in plastic. And so she said, no, we're not going to. And so they literally turned down a purchase order from Indigo until Indigo went, well, actually, we really want this stuff. So they changed their perspective. And now they're looking at how wholesale packaging is done differently because of that leadership, right? So these are the kinds of things that are possible in our world. This one, I have to have my notes for this because it's like super out there, amazing. But it's Grenjan. Sorry, that was from Manitoulin Island, Anong Beam, who's amazing. One of our other ventures, Connie from Edmonton, runs an organization called Grenjan. And they make battery systems that run on renewable energy. It's plug and play, modular. It's chargeable by any device. So like you can hand crank it to recharge it, or it can be plugged into solar, like intense systems that are out there. They're using it on huge golf courses. There's a large network of gas stations on the East Coast. They're converting everything to solar using their modular systems. The Canadian Forces are actually using this to replace all their diesel engines because there are 2.6 billion people on the planet who have to burn something to get any energy. And so this is a potential example for that. We have lots of other ones. This is Made with Local. Buy these. They're amazing. They're in Costco. They're in all these big stores. And they have a zero waste manufacturing facility in Nova Scotia. And then the last one I'll just share is Aurora Heat. Love this one, from Fort Smith and Northwest Territories. And they combine traditional Indigenous ways with the functionality of like delivering natural hand warmers. Instead of, those toxic plastic things that like heat you up and God knows what's in that stuff. These are amazing. My husband is like, can't stand winter. And he had battery operated gloves, which is like completely insane. Until this. And he puts these into his gloves, and it's made from beaver. And so there's like a lot of amazing examples out there. And if you are building a business, please pay attention to how you can be more sustainable. We need to be part of the solution and not part of the problem as women entrepreneurs, and lead the way.
Thanks very much.
Can I do one more thing? Sorry, I'm just sorry. There's a whole community of people that make this possible. Could all the community members from Corliss just please stand up? I just want to give them a hand because they contributed capital to make this possible.
Thanks, Vicki. And I think that when we think about the ecosystem, when we think about embedded biases, if we're serious about sustainable development goals, if we're serious about the transition to net zero, we need to apply that as a lens to funding programs. And we're seeing that increasingly with investors looking at sustainability. So it's, I think Corliss beat a path that many people are now venturing down. So back to you, Minister. You've read the report, you met with, it seems like, thousands of entrepreneurs every single day. But where do you see your priorities over the next few years in terms of building the ecosystem for women and others?
Well, thank you for the question. I came here today to really hear your insights and also the feedback from others. I mean, we started on this journey 2018, and where my head's at now is, so we've launched it, the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, but I want to kind of think about where's the direction of that? Where can we now take it? And so all I've been doing for the past little while is listening and seeing what's been working well. And obviously there's areas where we can really kind of take it to the next level. I love what you said earlier about, okay, so we've got all these ecosystem partners across the country. How do we better integrate them? So really right now I'm taking in the feedback and thinking about what's next. And I want to make sure that, number one, we continue on this journey of prioritizing women, Black, 2S LGBTQIA+, Indigenous entrepreneurs, bringing us all in, continue to level the playing field so that we can continue to build and foster the environment for all of us to participate in. So that's where my head's at, and I appreciate the opportunity for me to learn and gather more information.
Thanks. And I think, one of the things, it's not from my point of view, it's not an either or. It's not invest in large businesses or invest in SMEs. It's just we want to make sure that entrepreneurs are part of the equation. And the same is true with the focus on sustainability. We still want to promote productivity and growth and innovation, but not at any cost. And it's worth noting, it wasn't in my slides, but it's worth noting, Canada has more women unicorns than we've ever had before. And women are a higher percentage of unicorns in Canada than in the United States. So it isn't that women are only this or only that. To Magnolia's point, women are everywhere, and they're doing really important and impactful work. So Magnolia, I wanted to turn to you because we had met fairly recently, and I remember you talking to me just on the point of fragmentation within the entrepreneurship ecosystem. I remember you talking to me about how the pieces within the Indigenous entrepreneurship ecosystem fit together. And I thought it was a super interesting model that we could actually think about replicating or try to draw on in terms of strengthening the whole ecosystem. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Wendy, for the question. So NACA, we launched our Indigenous Women Entrepreneurship Program in March of 2022. So it's been about 2 years. It's a 3-year program. And when we were designing the program, we wanted to make sure that we addressed the barrier of access to capital. So part of that was establishing a microloan fund for Indigenous women entrepreneurs that specifically targeted women with micro businesses, as I mentioned, part-time or home-based, so they could access financing to start their business. But in addition to that, it was really important that we built the wraparound supports to accompany the financing. So part of that was having a dedicated business support officer within the Indigenous financial institution that was delivering the program. At NACA, we're a national Indigenous organization, and we have 58 Indigenous financial institutions across the country. 32 are delivering our women's program. So we have hired 25 business support officers across the country, many of which are Indigenous women entrepreneurs or Indigenous women. And the reason for that was, in our research, we knew that Indigenous women wanted to work with other Indigenous women or women because they had the same lived experience and understanding. And so that was a really important part of the program design. The other thing was developing workshops and training so that Indigenous women could come together and learn and, build their knowledge as well as confidence so they could go out and build their businesses. We've also have a mentorship program that we're piloting, so women can be matched with a mentor to support their business needs as well. And one of the things that I think is really important that we built into the program design, so for those 25 business support officers that are delivering the program locally and regionally, we bring them together 3 to 4 times a year to also invest in their capacity development and training. We were just in February, we spent a week at the Banff Center learning about project management for Indigenous organizations. So we've invested in their skill development so that they can better serve Indigenous women, but also part of it was so that they could come together and feel part of a broader network of women doing similar work across the country, so that they can lean on one another if they're having a hard time or don't know how to deal with a certain situation. And what we've seen is these women have actually they have a monthly Teams call where they come together informally to just connect and share best practices, lessons learned, or ask for input on something they're challenged with. And just to talk a little bit about the results we've seen in the last 2 years. So prior to when we launched the program in March of 2022, our lending to Indigenous women across our network was under 30%. It's now increased to 39%. So we're really, really proud of that. What that looks like is we've done over 330 microloans valued at over $6 million to Indigenous women across the country. And we've provided over 3,000 Indigenous women with some kind of advisory support services, or they've accessed training or education through our network. So it's been really, really successful. And maybe the last thing I'll just touch on is I've heard stories and from our members around one client, for example, she started with a $10,000 microloan to start her business. And then 6 months later, she came back and she accessed a $20,000 microloan. And now she's looking at accessing one closer to $100,000. So really the intention was to build that pipeline. So women, as I mentioned, we're starting kind of in the micro business space, but the idea was just to get them into the ecosystem so that they can continue to grow their business and access other supports out there.
And I think that was one of the things I learned in our conversation is it does seem the pieces fit together really nicely, and the access, because we know in Canada, the majority of businesses start with less than $5,000, but it's really hard to get $5,000. And within the Indigenous ecosystem, there seem to be supports at every step of the way in a way that women outside of that ecosystem often struggle to kind of find the stepping stones. So thanks very much for that. Nadine, we've talked a lot about accountability frameworks and competency frameworks and so on. And, you know, one of the themes, obviously, with WEKH is always what gets measured gets done, and making sure that we're spending our time and energy appropriately. Can you talk a little bit about competency frameworks and how they've applied in the work that you've done?
Yeah, of course. I was registering for an ICD course, that's Institute of Corporate Directors, as like I have time for that, all these things. But one of the things I noticed in the questions that they asked, they asked, what do you want to get out of this course? And in 6 months, we're going to follow up with you to see if we're meeting our promise to you. And we're going to follow up within a year. That we're making truly an intentional commitment from the moment the application was filled out. And as I was coming here today, I thought, this is really what's needed for women entrepreneurs. So we start, so whether it's through the financial statements or going to the banks or the business plan and all of that, but the support has to be, we're starting here, the data is released, and what happens 6 months from now, a year from now, how can we look back to see how we've moved the needle forward in terms of the numbers? We know that there's a gap, but how do we know we've measured the gap? A year from now, what will be the measurement? And I think that has to be entrenched in policy and all types of supports that we can then look to the outcome and measure that. You know, one of the other things that women entrepreneurs talk about is the confidence building as they are entering many different spaces. Do you know that women entrepreneurs, they are afraid to go to the bank and ask for money? It just doesn't happen. And why is that? Because we're not empowered. We're not empowered. We don't have the vernacular. We don't have the confidence. So when you talked about the data around it would be great for the bank to be more transparent with the data, but I think it's something that we all have to push for, that they release that information, because if they don't release it and we don't know where we're going, we don't know how to measure. And if we don't know how to measure, 10 years from now, we will come back in this same room and have the same conversation.
Thanks so much. And I got the hook from my staff. So, Minister, I want to give you the final word because I know you have to run. So, any last comments or words of encouragement for folks in the room?
I mean, like, just all of you being here is really encouraging me. To be honest, I kind of really needed this. It's been such a challenge, and, you know, advocating for the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy, getting the word out to as many people across the country from a remote area called Dawson City in the Yukon all the way out east. It's like there are so many people here in Toronto. We have so much support, but in more rural areas, there's just far less. And so I've been on this like mission to like get the word out so that we can bring in more women entrepreneurs to know that they have support. So your advocacy on my behalf also goes a long way. So share it to your friends, your network, tell them the good work that we're doing so that they can also participate. But really, as I said earlier, I want to thank you for your time. there could have been, and I think there's even like 100 or so people online as well. So thank you for tuning in, for participating and learning more. And to all the ecosystem partners, at the panel here up on the stage, every one of you, I appreciate all that you're doing. The future is truly bright. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we have a bit of a break now. The minister has to leave. The live streaming will end. So thanks to all of you out there in internet land, and we will reconvene at 10:45 with another panel. Thank you.